And now I'd like to introduce our speaker for today's presentation, Jimmy Platt, CEO of ArcPoint Labs, Las Vegas.
Good morning, Danica. My name is Jimmy Platt, and I own and run ArcPoint, which is an award-winning drug, alcohol, DNA testing company here in Las Vegas, Nevada. I've been doing this now for around 8 years. And what I'm hoping to do today is provide a very focused information on Las Vegas and drug testing here in Las Vegas and particular challenges that we face in Southern Nevada. And then later on in the conversation, I hope to explain a little bit more about the OSHA rules that came into effect last year. And just to give everybody a brief overview of OSHA and how automatically testing for post-accident is no longer allowed. And I also want to explain there are a number of very effective tools that can provide to help you have a drug-free workplace and all the drama and danger that you can avoid by having a very clear clarity in the drug testing policy that you have for your company. Now, working in Las Vegas, Nevada, occasionally we have to do on-site testing, and occasionally I've gone into places where the entire workforce is high or fast asleep in the afternoon, 20, 30 people. Normally phone bank type situations, but even for government workers. So drug testing in Nevada needs to be carried out. It's an important part of the hiring process. But a drug-free employee is 5 times less likely to file a workers' compensation claim, 4 times less likely to steal from their employer. 30% of business failures are due to employee theft, and they're 3.5 times more likely to be in an accident. Now, it's very important that these are in place because of recent things been happening in the economy with things like deaths due to overdoses, and it seems to be going exponentially. This chart here explains the breakdown of various opiates and methamphetamine and people dying from using drugs. And these are the very latest figures that come out. I did the research for this talk today, just in the last few days. And more than 64,000 Americans died from drug overdoses in 2016. It's going up at an incredible rate. And most companies don't even test for the drugs for oxycodone. It's a synthetic opiate, and therefore doesn't show in a normal opiate test. Now, I'm sure many of you understand why we drug test in businesses, but just to very briefly recap, I don't want to bore everybody with a load of statistics. All the biggest companies in Nevada, all over the country, drug test. Why do they drug test? For some very simple business reasons. 10% of employees abuse drugs. It's highest amongst employees under 25. 60% of people know somebody who's gone to work under the influence. 75% of drug users are unemployed. And here are some of the industries, if you want to take a second to find your industry, and it shows drug use and heavy alcohol use in different businesses. What's it costing you? Well, someone who uses drugs is 33% less productive. They have twice the healthcare costs. They're 4 times more likely for hospital days, absent 5 more days a month. And this is proven again and again and again and again. Current trends include fentanyl. This is incredibly powerful, and it was a drug that unfortunately that Prince was using when he passed away. It's 50 to 100 times the strength of morphine. And Orlando Special Agent Danny Banks at a press conference, this is actually April 2016, said, "Mark my words, this death pill will be in the hands of our high school age students in Central Florida. It is bad, bad stuff that is killing people, and it's here right now." And of course, since this was said in 2016, we now see more than 64,000 deaths last year due to opiate abuse, and fentanyl is part of the driving force behind those deaths. In Las Vegas, Nevada has the 4th largest drug overdose mortality rate in the nation. And incredibly, drug overdoses kill more people than automobiles. When someone dies in an automobile accident, it's very public. Lots of police cars, lots of ambulances, it's on the news. When somebody drives a drug overdose, the family is often ashamed. They die alone in a room somewhere. So you don't often hear about it. But it's incredible that there are now more drug overdoses, mortalities in Nevada than automobile accidents. Now, in the past, up until the last few years, the people who were always talking to legalizing marijuana were sort of scraggly men with beards without a job. But in 2014, that changed when legalization of marijuana started to come into the fore. And the number of the great and the good in Nevada, Chad Christensen there from Utah, there's Sig there, local Kingmaker, Oscar Goodman, all these people did apply for licenses at that time. We don't know who has the licenses because in Nevada they've made it not part of the public record. So whoever does own these places behind the scenes, we have absolutely no idea. Welcome to Nevada. We've now legalized marijuana. Here's a choice of the edibles that we now see. And recently I started going to parties when I went to Thanksgiving over Christmas. Suddenly you see edibles around people's houses. At one time people used to go outside to smoke marijuana, it would disappear, it'd be out of the public eye. But now suddenly it's much more socially acceptable as, why not, it's been legalized in Nevada. Whereas it might be quite funny to see Butterfinger and Trichome Crunch, it masks a lot of the sadness and the misery that can be found with marijuana use in Nevada. Welcome to fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, I'd just like to speak about marijuana. We hear so much these days about how wonderful marijuana is, how it's the cure for impotence or for childhood leukemia, or it seems to be everything we see on Facebook, everything we read everywhere. There's a big machine out there that looks to make a lot of money out of it, and we never hear anything switch the other side. But of course, with it being legal now in Colorado now for a number of years, there's a lot more information coming out on marijuana use. And nothing against marijuana use in itself, but everybody needs to be aware of the dangers involved and make a decision based on the facts, not just on a lot of stuff coming out of Facebook. The structural brain caused by marijuana used by adolescents and adults, including only casual use, is permanent. That's why when you know somebody at 17 who's smoking drugs and know them at 50, they're still as dopey as they ever were. It's not like with most drugs, alcoholism, where you can clean yourself up and you get better. The brain damage that's caused in young adults, it lasts a lifetime. Exposure to edibles has increased, not surprised. And of course, the side effects from marijuana have led to far more emergency room visits than all the other substances combined. And that's from SAMHSA 2013. And it sort of goes against the sort of national conversation of marijuana, but really in the real world, the facts are coming through thick and fast. A study of 1,000 people from birth to age 38 showed lasting cognitive decline amongst marijuana users that did not change with adult abstinence. Just because you stop, you don't get better. And of course, the 40% risk of psychotic symptoms disorders occurs in those who use marijuana as compared to those who do not. And of course, the United Kingdom in the low 2000s, they decriminalized marijuana. And they had to recriminalize it due to the huge increase in paranoid schizophrenia and the mental illness that was produced, and also the crime that became from that paranoid schizophrenia. And the same in Amsterdam, which all my life had been the poster child for a free and easy life. In 2012, due to the increase in mental illness caused by marijuana use, they've come down and they now clamp down on the laws that they always had in place, but they now actually exercise those laws. And that comment there just backs it up again. Today's strains of THC are far stronger. And it's no surprise that when we see crimes on TV now, that it's very rare that actually mental illness is often a mentioned cause, that they have guns and all the rest of it. No one seems to want to mention the toxicology of what was involved in the crime. Now that was a pretty heavy segment. I was just putting the counter-arguments, as there's so much put forward on marijuana. I just wanted to mention, give people the chance to comment on what I've just said, and just to reintroduce the argument of why marijuana has been banned over the many years. Does anybody have any questions? Please feel free.
Yeah, and again, if you'd like to ask a question, feel free to do so in the chat box on the bottom left corner of your screen. I'm going to just switch over to the call real quick. Looks like we do have one question. What should be in a workplace drug policy?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. With the introduction of marijuana and legalization of marijuana in southern Nevada, this has suddenly created a lot of confusion on the surface because suddenly you can actually legally buy it. What does this mean to my place in the workplace? Over the next few minutes, I'm going to be talking through what would make up a great drug test policy. I would like you to hold your questions, any more questions, till the end of the meeting. But thank you very much for the question, Alyssa. There we go. And what I'd like to refer to now is move over from the legalization of marijuana in Nevada over to the OSHA rules that came into effect at the start of 2017. These rules do not apply to Department of Transportation to federal testing. But I'll just read out the OSHA rationale. OSHA believes the evidence in the rulemaking record shows that blanket post-injury drug testing policies deter proper reporting. So what does that mean? That means you can no longer automatically drug test following an accident. So let me repeat that, please. So if somebody is involved in an accident, you can no longer automatically send them for a drug test. And if you do automatically send them for a drug test, you're liable to some extremely high fines. Now, the final rule does prohibit employers from using drug testing. The threat of drug testing is a form of adverse action against employees who report injuries or illnesses. And to strike the appropriate balance here, drug testing policies should limit post-incident testing to situations in which employee drug use is likely to have contributed to the incident, and for which the drug test can accurately identify impairment caused by drug use. Now, this is a huge shift. What OSHA is saying is that people would not report an accident because they knew they'd been taking drugs, and even whether or not they mattered to the accident, they wouldn't report the accident because they were scared. And also it meant that no matter what the situation, the employer could send them for a drug test to try and get out of paying workers' comp. So you can't automatically send somebody now. But so suddenly, where does that leave my company? The key point is not to discriminate against the employee who reports such an injury or illness. And no blanket policy for post-accident drug testing, as this would be considered discriminatory. And the central inquiry for evaluation by OSHA will be whether the employer had a reasonable basis for believing that drug use by the reporting employee could have contributed to the injury or illness. So, as an example, carpal tunnel syndrome brought on by repetitive motion at work would not be a reason to drug test. OSHA will only consider whether the drug test is capable of measuring impairment at the time of the injury or illness occurred, and where such a test is available. And the general principle here is that drug testing may not be used by the employer as a form of discipline against employees who report an injury or illness, but may be used as a tool to evaluate the root causes of workplace injuries and illness in appropriate circumstances. So if somebody has been stung by a bee, you don't necessarily send them for a drug test. But having said that, their behaviour prior to getting stung by a bee might have given cause to why you might send them for a drug test. So suddenly, we come into a world where training is going to be of the utmost importance. Now, in Las Vegas, Nevada, it's suddenly become, as it's legal, and if your company policy does not say anything against using marijuana, of course, it means people now legally, during their breaks, are entitled to perhaps have a quick spliff, as people used to do in the past, perhaps have a drink at lunchtime. Depends on the social atmosphere in the business. There's no real difference now between smoking marijuana and having perhaps a glass of wine with your lunch. So unless you have a drug testing policy, you're inviting a lot of hurt into your life. The biggest protection that we have against drug abuse in Las Vegas is the federal law, and this is still in place. Under federal law, it is illegal to possess, use, buy, sell, or cultivate marijuana in all United States jurisdictions since the Controlled Substances Act of 1970, which classifies marijuana as a Schedule I drug, maintaining it as a high potential for abuse and has no acceptable medical use. And the medical use bar is not that high. They just have to get placebo, people taking it, and people not taking it into 3 separate groups and demonstrate that it actually serves a purpose beyond, it has to be proved like every other drug in the United States of America. And when that happens, the federal law will change. So it's a matter of some urgency that if you've not thought about these problems before, or in your work policy, what you're inviting into the workplace, what you need to put in place. I've done on-site in the last 12 months where we've gone to construction companies where there's been a serious accident where somebody's died. And we go in and test the people, and 10 of the 16 people who are operating heavy equipment on the roads of Nevada are taking cocaine and marijuana exactly the same time in very high doses. Obviously, drug testing needs to take place regularly and is a very important part of the hiring process. So what is next? As an employer in Las Vegas, Nevada, what is next? What can you do to protect yourself from the legalization of marijuana and drug use in the workplace? The first thing is a well-worded drug testing policy. Now, this is the foundation of your compliance. Verbiage referencing automatic testing to prevent an accident needs to be removed, therefore not be deemed retaliatory and discourage reporting. Testing needs to be based on whether or not being under the influence could have caused the accident, or whether or not testing indicates they were under the influence. It all starts sounding a little bit wordy, but really, it just needs to be clearly worded, and you need to review the methodology to eliminate hair testing for any post-incident or accident testing, because methodology needs to reflect what has just taken place. Urine testing detects within hours of use, has the widest panels for prescription and popular drugs of abuse. And often the worst thing can happen after an accident, or after when you want a drug test because of reasonable suspicion, where somebody appears to be absolutely out of their head, is to make sure that you're testing for the drug that they could be high on. And these days, what's coming more and more to the fore, and the latest advances in technology, is lab-based oral fluid, which provides a close link to recent use, and that the donor is under the influence at the time of the test. And in the last couple of years, this has come along leaps and bounds. 2 or 3 years ago, we used to do a thing called a trio, where you'd have a hair test, urine test, and a saliva test, the same person. The saliva test would never hit. The hair test would hit 40% of the time, and urine would hit like 75% of the time. So therefore, we gravitated towards urine as the most accurate and effective way of judging someone's use. But oral fluid is now far more accurate and far more indicative of somebody's recent use. Really important is training. As I was mentioning before about somebody who was the bumblebee, or why you'd send somebody to test after an accident, if you've been trained and you can say, well, they were dropping things, they were slurring their words, they were sweating profusely, if you can write those things down, going through simple training, you can say, why did you send them to be tested? Was because they were falling asleep, the eyes weren't opening properly, they're diluted. As long as you can name it, you can send them to be tested under reasonable suspicion. And now it seems to be the same for post-accident. If they're exercising, you can see why they might have had the accident, and it might be to do with drugs. Because you've had some simple training, you can send them to be tested, and legally, you're protected. And anybody who could ever have cause to decide that test must take place, whether for reasonable suspicion or for post-accident, should undergo training immediately. If you're responsible for sending somebody else to be tested, legally you must protect yourself. And some simple training can make that happen. And finally, nip the problem in the bud. Review hiring practices and workplace testing, prevent and discourage drug abusers entering in your workplace. And use accredited facilities for effective testing, improve test panels, and introduce random testing. Now, a lot was said there. It is pointless sending something simply to Quest or LabCorp, where the staff all day are doing all sorts of a myriad of tests. And it's very simple for somebody just to come in, provide a substitute urine, and just go on their way. And we know from our facility, because all we do is drug testing, that people turn up expecting this to happen. They're just going to bring in something they bought online or from a friend, and they're simply going to stay after the drug test. And there's protocols and there's effective measures in place to stop that most simple thing from happening. Use accredited facilities, just so there's some written example as to why and the standards that they have. Again, just simply using some national chain when the people there aren't particularly trained in any way, shape or form, and most of the day is spent collecting medical tests. They're not geared up to be looking for drug use, drug abuse amongst potential employees. And by just simply keeping them out of the workplace for 30, 40, $50, it's probably the best money you're ever going to spend. And as mentioned before, you need to mention that the drug that you're testing for includes things like oxycodone, a synthetic opioid. 5-panel drug tests don't cater to synthetic opioids, as we saw before, 64,000 people killed last year from overdoses. With half of the United States now allowing some form of marijuana use, the workplace has become a hotbed of controversy when it comes to changing workplace drug policies. Many employers are now under pressure from employees to loosen their policies and making allowances for marijuana as a social drug, most often compared to alcohol. There are similarities in the way that you would not allow an employee to be intoxicated at work. And likewise, you would not allow an employee to be impaired under the influence of marijuana. The substances, however, are quite different. And when it comes to determining whether an employee is currently under the influence of marijuana or has residual THC that is metabolized, while the majority of companies, particularly those that are safety-sensitive employees, choose to maintain a zero-tolerance policy, there are plenty of employers asking to create some form of tolerance. These are multifaceted issues in the culture of acceptance, and each particular issue must be carefully reviewed with safety at the core of the conversation. Understanding that contemporary marijuana products, whether leaf-based, edibles, oils, or extracts, contain substantially greater amounts of impairing THC than traditional marijuana in the past, with longer-lasting side effects and subacute impairments, are new concerns that employers must take into consideration. And there are entire sectors now of the workforce that tolerate employee marijuana use, but on the pictures that I've just shown there, who wants to be treated, who wants their blood taken by someone who could possibly be high or under the influence, no matter what level? Who wants them treating your pets? We had one case in Las Vegas where twice in the same week, all the wheels fell off a car because the tyre company forgot to tighten the lug nuts. That happened twice in 2 days. Why? Because the staff were baked. That's why it happened. But every day these cars are driving out, and these companies are not obliged to drug test. Those companies are drug test now because the insurance companies insisted that they did. In addition, employees should be expected to be in a quarterly pool for random drug screens. Now, this protocol sends a clear and consistent message that safety is expected. Now, zero tolerance is the best policy, but immediate termination does not necessarily have to be the only response. Now, as the example of random drug screens, in the 1990s, they introduced it for DOT, for people driving the planes, people in car driving trucks around. And from the people I know from that time who were around at that time, when the testing came in, within 2 or 3 months, from a third to a half of their workforce taking or abusing drugs, it cut away to a tiny amount. So random testing as an example and as an excuse for your employees not to take drugs works. It's as simple as that. So, in summary, in any scenario pertaining to drug or alcohol use, it's vital to treat all employees equally and fairly, giving each the same opportunity as others. If the choice is made to alter a workplace drug and alcohol policy, make the choice with the full knowledge of the risks involved and a review with the options with a few final considerations. If your company chooses to create an atmosphere of acceptance for recreational use, does this not open up a can of worms for allowing all drugs to be used? What are the implications of doing so? Where will the boundaries lie? And how will you defend your policy as more progressive attitudes towards drug use come in? Marijuana remains a Schedule I substance abuse because it still meets all the criteria to be classified as such. If your workplace does happen to receive federal dollars, you may not have any options in the matter. But while the concept of marijuana legalization is trending as one philosophical option for on how to deal with America's drug problem, many do not consider the most viable solution, and specific outcomes in this modern experiment are largely unknown. Workplace impact is particularly important, but it will take years to gather data and understand the full array of consequences. Using common sense logic, an approach that prioritizes work health and safety must beg the question: just because they can, doesn't necessarily mean that they should. I'm just going to recap at the end. Judy Garland died from drug overdose. Marilyn Monroe, Michael Jackson, Heath Ledger, Prince, all these people had their whole lives before them, successful, attractive, articulate, autistic. Because of drug abuse, they died. There's Lakeisha Holloway, mounted the curb in Las Vegas, killing, I think it was 6 people. Paranoid schizophrenic high on marijuana. Jamie Holmes, Colorado killer, known as the kid who was smoking weed, paranoid schizophrenic. And also the Reno doctor who just in November 2017, for selling opioids and for involuntary manslaughter, was sentenced to 10 years in jail. I mentioned before that it's pointless using a company where a lab that is not accredited or used to identifying drug use by the people coming through. These days people can buy anything online, they can research it. Even in Las Vegas, if you look for drug testing employee, hair detox comes up. Load of money, people make their money out of selling things to get you through a drug test. You need to hire a company that reflects your values and ethics. My name is Jimmy Platt. I'm more than happy to help anybody on this call. If they want to, free of charge, develop their drug test policy, have templates, have questions, I can create clarity in your workplace so that you can have a drug-free, drama-free, safe workplace. We are accredited by DAISHA, the Drug and Health Testing Industry Association. We're the only one in the Valley to be accredited. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you so much, Jimmy. And again, if you'd like to ask a question, feel free to do so in the chat box on the bottom left corner of your screen. Or if you're just on your phone only, you can press *7. So I'm going to go back to the conference now. I have a quick question. You know, in marijuana, there's like two chemicals that you have. There's the THC, and then there's also the CBD part. So is there a way for people to test for whether it's a THC strain or a CBD strain?
This is changing all the time, but as part of a workplace policy, you should just have it listed, and then because of the ADA Act, at some point, Nevada's going to have to allow people, American Disabilities Act, will allow people who have a legitimate reason for taking marijuana, the CBD, which is a substance that doesn't make you high, in the workplace. As that testing becomes more popular and we can get hold of it as a laboratory, then that's what we will do. But it'd be great to have the positive aspects of marijuana without the negative aspects of marijuana.
I want to thank you so much. It doesn't look like we have any questions on the call, but I want to thank you so much, Jimmy, for presenting today. I really appreciate it. Thank you all for joining us on the call today. And how can they reach you?
Our number for our office is 702-451-5434. But if you just Google ArcPoint Las Vegas, you can easily find us, and we'll be happy to help.
Yeah, and all of his information was also on the slide, on the PowerPoint slide before this. So, again, we do have one question. Do you think in the future safety-sensitive jobs will be required to test?
When marijuana was first legalized in Las Vegas, we had no idea how the market was going to go. As it happens, most businesses have started tightening up, and testing, alcohol testing, is now even more common than what it was before, as people rush to try and protect safety-sensitive jobs. I honestly believe that if you're doing some kind of safety-sensitive job, whether it's in medical, whether it's driving a truck around Las Vegas, that you're always going to be tested. Nobody wants anybody driving under the influence. And any employer should expect their employee to be fully present in every capacity, particularly when it's safety sensitive. I can only see in the future testing hopefully will improve and come down in price perhaps a little bit, but right now it's extremely competitive. But we were always going to need testing for safety sensitive jobs. Thank you for the question.
All right, well, again, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to remind everybody that Chamber University next week is all about the Southern Nevada Water Authority is going to be out here. They're going to talk a little bit about like the rebates you can get for your business for being water smart, conserving water in your business. So again, thank you, Jimmy, so much. Thank you to ArcPoint, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you very much.